Good morning. Welcome to Auburn Unitarian Universalist Fellowship, located on occupied ancestral land of the Muscogee Creek Nation. My name is Jim Newton, and I will be serving as Service Associate today. Some of us are bringing our best selves to this space, and some of us are bringing our struggling selves, including pieces we might be ashamed of. All of us are welcome here, and all of us are loved. Some of us already have open hearts, and some of us aren't quite there yet because our hearts have gotten a little beat up this week and might have forgotten how to trust and open. Your heart is welcome here, no matter how bruised. We welcome you among us. All of us are imperfect, but we're here to drop our defenses and trust that what happens in community is powerful and life-giving. Together, we affirm that this day and our being together can make each of us braver, more compassionate, and wiser than when we woke up this morning. We welcome you here. On behalf of the members of the fellowship, I extend a special welcome to all visitors who are joining us for the first time, and to those of you who still feel like visitors. If you have not already done so, please fill out a digital visitor card by visiting auuf.org/visitor so that we may welcome you. You may also contact our minister, Reverend Chris Rothbauer, at minister@auuf.org with any questions or concerns you may have. Let us move into the service, willing to be authentic with each other, honest within ourselves, and open to connection in all its forms. Our opening words this morning are an excerpt of an RE lesson created by Jessica York, the UUA's Director of Congregational Life. Desegregation was a very controversial topic in 1948. Anything about skin color and racism was controversial. Some people, even some who supported African Americans in demanding their civil liberties, believed in a separate but equal policy which kept people apart based on their skin color. Respectful debate ensued at the First Unitarian Society of Chicago. Both sides felt in their heart that their belief was right. Perhaps they were so busy trying to be heard, they forgot to listen. And so they kept on talking. The debate went on in the board of directors meeting until the early hours of the morning. Everyone was exhausted and frustrated. Finally, James Luther Adams remembered that we should be listening twice as much as talking. He asked the person who had voiced the strongest objection, "What do you say is the purpose of this church?" Suddenly, everyone was listening. Everyone wanted to hear the answer to this crucial question. Probably the person who objected was listening especially hard to his own heart, as well as to the words he had heard from other board members through the long discussion. The board member who opposed opening the church to people of color finally replied, "Okay, Jim, the purpose of this church is to get hold of people like me and change them." The First Unitarian Society of Chicago successfully desegregated. There are things that you know, and there are things that I know. When we are together and listening to each other with ears and hearts, we know more.
These things shall be a loftier race than ever the world hath known shall rise, with flame of freedom in their souls, and light
I invite you to light your chalice with us this morning with these words from Eric Walker Wickstrom, Why We're Here. Here today in this place and with these people, may we listen so that we can hear. May we hear so that we can feel. May we feel so that we may know, and may we know so that we can change ourselves in this world. May this chalice of light our way. As is our tradition, we also light a candle in solidarity with those families separated at our southern border. I would like to invite you to join us in our opening hymn, hymn number 1046 in the Teal hymnal, Shall We Gather at the River? The words will be shared on screen. One of the ways that we proclaim the warmth and caring of our community is by sharing our joys, concerns, and milestones. We invite those who wish to use the Zoom chat box to type your joy, concern, or milestone during the music for meditation. If you wish for your joy or concern to be acknowledged, but don't want to share it, you may also type that you have an unspoken joy or concern. Thank you to all who shared their joys, concerns, and milestones this morning. May all the joys, concerns, and milestones of this community, those shared aloud and those held in silence, be received into the care and concern of all present. The offering that we take each Sunday isn't just a stale habit. It's an opportunity to recommit to this place and to this people. Our offering is an affirmation, a yes. When we give, we say yes to something we value. With our gifts freely given, may we say yes to the values of our faith. May our offering help us practice Unitarian Universalism within and beyond our congregation as tools to empower our mission. To make a donation online via PayPal, please visit auuf.org/donate. If you are writing a check, please make your check payable to AUUF with a note on the memo line about whether it is for the offering or your pledge, and mail it to P.O. Box 669, Auburn, Alabama 36831. The offering will now be gratefully received. I would like to invite you to join us in our next hymn, hymn number 100 in the great hymnal, Peace Like a River.
Oh, Lord.
I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river. I've got peace like a river in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain. I've got joy like a fountain in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean. I've got love like an ocean in my soul.
Good morning, everyone. It's good to be here with you as always, this time in just a slightly different role. Nothing constant but change, eh? Growing up, I always thought of myself as pretty strong and highly adaptable. I had overcome each challenge that life had placed before me, finding a way out of the poverty I was raised in, joining the military to put myself through college, graduating from college and finding a job, establishing a household, getting married, buying my first home, becoming a father, moving across country, dealing with economic downturns, losing loved ones to old age. Each time life threw me a challenge, I seemed to be able to find my way through and emerge on the other side mostly unscathed. I had turned away from the faith of my childhood and gotten through life pretty well with the belief that I had everything I needed to survive and thrive between my two ears and within my own two hands. Living in my own egocentric bubble as a tall, white, cis hetero man, it was completely lost on me that a great deal of my success came because the system was tilted so heavily in my favor. The world I inhabited was designed by and for people that looked just like me, And although I did have some challenges to overcome, those challenges were not exacerbated by the systems that were designed to make it even harder for me to succeed. Mentors continued to appear, one after another, to share tips on how the game is played and to open doors for me. By the time my daughter was born, I figured I was prepared to handle anything that life could throw my way. An early mentor that emerged as I began my journey towards ministry said, "You seem to have all the basic qualities needed to become just a fine minister, except," wait for it, here it comes. You know the truth bomb always lands right after a word like "except" followed by a long pause. "Except," he said, "I don't think the world has ever dropped you on your ass. And that would be a really helpful experience for you to have if you are truly going to be qualified for the part of this job that calls upon you to hold others through their darkest hours." Thanks for that, James. Appreciate it. One of those moments had actually come to me beforehand when my daughter was 2. She'd never really been sick, so when she finally came down with a cold, all seemed to be normal. Then a couple days later, it was clear that she had taken a bad turn and needed to go to the doctor. When we arrived at the doctor, after a few minutes, she said to us, "I'm going to run a few more tests, but I want to prepare you. If they come back one way, I'm going to be sending you straight to the emergency room. But if they come back another way, there will be EMT in here in about 90 seconds, and they'll be taking your daughter to the emergency room." 2 minutes later, EMT were in the room. A few minutes after that, my wife was climbing into the ambulance with them and my daughter, and I found myself in a car racing behind them, having no idea what was happening to my beautiful and always to that point healthy little girl. I found myself praying to a God that I had never known in that moment, promising whatever I could in exchange for her safety. I came to learn that babies just don't have the strength to come back from as high of temperatures she had developed. After a few days in the hospital with some IV fluids and the care of some wonderful nurses and doctors, my little girl was back to her old self. At least in this chapter, all turned out to be fine. I've since come to learn that the God I was praying to was the result of what is called embedded theology. If you're on a plane and the captain says the engines have failed and you're going down, even the most ardent atheist among us is more than likely going to begin asking the most prominent god found in their society for some kind of miracle. If I'd been born in India, I would have been summoning the favor of Ganesh as I chased behind that ambulance. There are just some moments where life throws us a bit more than we can handle on our own. And when you find yourself drowning, the most natural reaction is to cry out for help to whoever happens to be closest at hand. A few weeks later, when life returned to normal, I found myself touring a new preschool that was opening up in the basement of a UU church, which I had no idea what that was. I must have picked up a "What is UU" flyer while I was there. And sometime shortly after that, I found myself sitting in the back of a Sunday morning church service. For those of you that found this faith tradition later in life, you likely know the next few chapters of this part of my story. Wow, this isn't what I thought church was. Huh, I seem to have found my people. Sure, I can help cleaning out the kitchen after coffee hour. And then a stint on the auction committee and leading an RE class and on the board and chairing the membership committee. You know how it goes. Now, most sane folks stop there and just settle into the community and the comfort it provides. In this story, the main character ends up on your screens on a Sunday morning, a few weeks out from their ordination date. But that's a whole different story for a whole different time. The point of this story is what we find when our journeys take, for what many of us is a very unexpected turn, into a Unitarian Universalist church. For me and for many of us, one of the primary things we find, in some cases for the first time in our lives, is the safety net that becomes available when we become part of an intentional community. Before I stumbled into church that morning, I thought I had everything I needed. My daughter's health scare was an unexpected but ultimately temporary blip. The healthcare system was there to help my family through the crisis, and I went back about the business of living, which in our capitalist society means that I got back onto the treadmill and kept running as fast as I could, because I knew that if I ever stumbled, that train would just roll over me and leave me behind. I'd watched it happen to my dad. I'd seen it happen to too many folks around me that had been downsized when either their skills had diminished or the market had gone one way and the organization they had been working with hadn't pivoted in the right direction. Change can be an unforgiving foe. We've all had to deal with some unexpected and unwelcome change in this past year, eh? I certainly didn't learn to adapt to the realities of a global pandemic on my short list of 2020 New Year's resolutions. Truth is, change is one of the only constants in this universe. The brilliant Black science fiction writer Octavia Butler wrote, "All that you touch, you change. All that you change changes you. The only lasting truth is change. God is change." Here's where we get to the conundrum. We know there's nothing constant but change. But one of the things we humans resist most of all is, can you guess? You know the answer is change. Our ancestors survived by becoming acutely aware of their surroundings, finding the things that were safe, passing that knowledge down, and making sure their descendants didn't try the pretty red berries that were unknown, or going off into the jungle alone. Once a lesson was learned, it was passed down and followed religiously to ensure safety. We evolved to understand which behaviors in our environment were safe and which were not, and learned to create comfortable lives by staying within those lines. The world didn't tend to change all that rapidly, and all was well within our tribes. Until it wasn't. Sometimes life came along and upended the table. Some were able to adapt, some were not. And after the table was upended, those that were left were forced to figure out the new rules of the new game. Then the new ways were figured out, the players settled back into the new game, and life went on. Life is changing more rapidly than ever today. The pace of technological advances these days is astounding. Our climate is changing at a faster pace than many organisms that have adapted to their current environment are able to keep pace with. And as we have seen, diseases can morph and for a time get ahead of our bodies and science's ability to adapt to, sometimes with catastrophic consequences. What then can we do? The sermon title I came back up with a few months ago when I saw that the theme of the month was acceptance was flow with the changes. So I guess that's the answer I'm going to have to go with. As often happens between when I select a title and when I sit down to write, my perspective shifts. What I really want to talk to you today is about the resilience that can be found by becoming connected to an intentional community like AUUF. But I'm going to have to do a little pivot here. Nothing constant but change, right? Water is actually a really good metaphor for the characteristics that increase our ability to survive and thrive in the sometimes chaotic world we find ourselves living within. Never static, expanding to fill whatever space it finds itself flowing into. Water is a master of change. But more than just a passive entity, water both adapts and influences the world around it. I love the line in the book Memoirs of a Geisha, where the matriarch is speaking to the young protege with the uncommon blue eyes. She said, "You have the power of water within you. Water is powerful. It can wash away earth, put out fire, and rust iron. Water can even carve its way through stone. And when trapped, water makes a new path." Most of the things we humans tend to try to put in place to keep ourselves safe are fixed. We call settling into a new home setting down roots. We develop habits and rituals that create supportive routines in our lives. And we can get thrown off our game when something disrupts our routines. We find our places of comfort, and we can become agitated when something comes along that feels out of our control and forces us to change the structures we have created for our own versions of safety and comfort. But here's my pivot to community. A drop of water by itself does not possess many of the qualities I described before. A single drop of water is no match for a raging fire. A single drop of water does not possess the strength to wear down the earth. A single drop of water will evaporate long before it has had the time to rust the iron in its path. A single drop of water doesn't really have too much power at all. But when that single drop joins together with many other drops, water will always find a way. I think of the Unitarian Universalist faith like a river. And a community like this is one of the tributaries that flows into and strengthens that river. The sources of Unitarian and Universalist rivers that have flowed for a long time and have had an inordinate impact on the direction of our society. If we think of faith as a collection of ideas and survival strategies, their sources can be traced back to the Protestant Reformation, and before that to Catholicism, and prior to that, Judaism and beyond. Each of these traditions emerged from and became part of a collective flow of ideas that have passed down from one generation to the next, adding drops, adapting to new environments, and creating new tributaries, which this current faith tradition is but one. Now, you can easily agree or disagree with the ideas that form the foundations that led to the current river we find ourselves a part of. One thing you can't argue is that, right or wrong, each of the iterations of this river has enabled large numbers of its collective to survive and thrive, its collective drops to survive and thrive. The 7.8 billion people alive on this planet today, 4.4 billion of them trace their ancestry back to Judaism. 2.4 billion trace the roots of a current faith back to some other religion. And the 1.1 billion that currently describe themselves as atheist or agnostic most likely arrived at those belief systems as a reaction against the religions of their ancestors. Whether you believe in one thing or another, there's very clearly something about religion that has led to the survival of all the current inhabitants on this planet. Now, of course, it's also very easy to note that religion has been the source of elimination of many different groups of folks on this planet as well. So let's not put religion too high up on a pedestal just yet. Let's think, at least for a moment, about some of the aspects of intentional communities like this one, aligned around a particular set of ideas that offers strength and adaptability to those that intentionally join together to follow that shared set of beliefs. The root word of religion is the Latin word ligare, which means to bind together. A religious community, even a mostly secular one like ours, is based on the idea of joining together with others. The properties of water, which give it its remarkable abilities, are connected to a unique electron structure that allows it to connect and change forms and interact with a myriad of other substances. This, for me, is the power of Unitarian Universalism. This faith is not based upon a static, unchanging creed. Instead, it is designed to be like water, ever changing as it flows, providing nourishment to those who find its stream, combining the force of other like-minded humans to wear down the identified injustices of the world. If you find yourself scared or overwhelmed by the pace of change or the news stories of the day, knowing that you're part of a community is a far more powerful place to be than off on your own. Before I found this faith tradition, I told you I was on the capitalist hamster wheel. running as fast as I could to survive and fearful that if I ever stumbled, I might get thrown off and never be able to get back on. Becoming a part of a community changed my whole perspective. I was no longer alone. I began contributing to a community, and those contributions came with an unspoken but believed faith that I was no longer alone, and that if I stumbled, there were now many others around me that would make sure that I didn't get left behind. A mentor, while recovering from a breast cancer diagnosis, described the support she received from a community at the time as being like the interconnected web, which I had never actually seen, but always just took as an article of faith was there, finally emerged and became visible and caught me when I fell. Having experienced the gift that other mentor offered me over the past few years of having life knock me on my ass, I can share from personal experience that this is an apt metaphor. Being a part of an intentional community like this one can be an amazing source of resilience to help us face an ever-changing and sometimes unflinching world. The religion of capitalism has created a false narrative into our embedded theology that puts us each at the center of our own lives. But as deceptive and as comforts of structures of capitalism are, it is not the source of our greatest strengths. Whatever the specific beliefs, the success of religion as a survival mechanism has been the power to bind individuals around a set of ideas regarding how to live together. My message to you today, as many of us are eager to come back into the ways that we were able to be before the pandemic forced our separation, is to remember what you longed for when gatherings became impossible. As humans do, we found ways to stay somewhat connected within our comforting embrace of our group, despite the distance temporarily required to ensure our safety. Might not have been our preference, but the alternative was to go off and try to face this separation alone. And as we've discussed, drops to try to face the world alone quickly evaporate in the heat of the sun. Perhaps the biggest strength of our chosen faith tradition is that we don't force you to believe any specific thing. This river has room for all kinds of different drops. But at some level, we do all profess some commonalities, and we each benefit most when we join our flows together. It is this flowing together that is the source of our strength and resilience. This is the dichotomy we each have to wrestle with to gain the benefits of this faith. While we live in a society that tells us we can each do our own thing, reality is we are far stronger if we relinquish at least a bit of that independence to join with other drops that are flowing in the direction that we have collectively come to believe feels like the best way to reach that shining sea. As we come back together, and as we continue to struggle with the inherent differences each of us adds to this river, I leave you with a simple checklist to consider as you decide which path forward will lead to the best outcomes for you in the future. If, when faced with a choice, the way forward you want benefits you, but leaves others behind, it's probably not the best choice. If you know a choice you're thinking about making benefits the collective, but it feels like you have to sacrifice too much of yourself to bring it to life, then it's probably not a choice that you'll find to be sustainable over time. But if you can find a path that seems to benefit the collective, and you can see offers some benefit to you, even if it isn't your first choice, then that is likely the best path to choose. I hope one of the lessons we never forget as we emerge from this global crisis is how difficult it is trying to survive without each other. I know that surviving together sometimes requires compromise, but the benefits and the strength that is available to us, if we intentionally join the flow of a community like this one, far outweighs the costs. I can't say what will come next. The only thing I could promise you in this miraculous and often beautiful life is that some next change will come, and it will present us with new and unexpected challenges. I used to think I had everything I needed to face these challenges on my own. I'm grateful to have learned, having joined together with you and all the other folks I've met along this way as a part of this quirky and unconventional faith, that life's challenges never have to be faced alone. As long as I stay connected to each of you and you stay connected to each other, there is no fire that we can't extinguish, no obstacle that we can't find a way to flow through or around, as long as we remember to do it together. Blessed be, and may it be so.
I now invite us all into a time of quiet reflection. Close your eyes if that feels comfortable. Notice the places where your body is connected to the earth. Breathe in and breathe out as naturally as you can. And as your mind and body begin to settle, take a few moments to reflect upon the words, images, and moments that were shared here today. Create space to allow your consciousness to reflect upon all that it has experienced. This space, intentionally created, is the place from which all new ideas emerge. This space is the birthplace of all human change. Please join me in extinguishing our chalices. You will find the words on the screen.
We extinguish this flame, but not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry in our hearts until we are together again.
Please join us now for our sung benediction.
Go forth into the world in peace, in peace. Be of good courage, hold fast that which is good. Go forth into the world in peace, in peace. Love all people, rejoicing in the power of the Spirit. Go in peace.
In closing, we have these words by Deborah Hafner. It is our journey together. We are on a journey. We didn't plan it. We didn't have time for the bread to rise. We may find ourselves in the wilderness, hungry, thirsty, doubting that we should have ever come. But look around. We are not alone. It is our journey together, a journey to our better selves, a journey to a better world, a journey to a more promised land.